There are a few feelings quite like standing on your own land. Doesn't matter if it's huge acreage, a working farm, or just a nice piece of vacant ground.
Hmm.
And inviting people out, friends, family, coworkers, sharing that space you own, it feels amazing, like a real accomplishment.
It absolutely is a huge sense of pride. But let's be honest, the second you open that gate to guests, that pride gets kind of mixed with, well, a heavy dose of liability worry.
Yeah, that legal risk, the what if someone gets hurt? What if there's a conflict or worse, a lawsuit? That can really sour the whole experience, can it?
Keeps a lot of landowners up at night. Definitely. It's a big
Yeah.
responsibility.
Exactly. So, our mission today is to tackle that anxiety head on. We want to swap out that vague worry for some really concrete actions you can take.
Right.
We've dug into this great 7-step guide. It was originally put together for property managers and owners of vacant land. And it basically turns that fuzzy idea, be responsible, into an actual actionable checklist.
And this advice comes from a solid source shared via the American Hunting Lease Association. So it's practical stuff.
So the goal here for you listening is to walk away feeling like you have a clear 3-part process, really. Something that balances keeping people safe with, ironclad liability protection for yourself.
Yeah, we're moving beyond just talking about it. We're getting into specific strategies, things you can actually do to protect yourself and, frankly, your family's asset.
Okay, let's dive in. First big theme. It's all about setting up the paper trail and legal defense. This is where it starts, right? Before anyone even steps foot on your property.
Absolutely. And step one is simple but crucial: document. Document everything.
Okay, document. That sounds broad. What specifically are we talking about here?
Well, think of documentation as the absolute foundation of your legal defense. If, heaven forbid, you end up in a legal situation, you need proof. Proof that you acted responsibly and critically when you acted.
Ah, the when.
Yes. The sources we looked at really stress noting the dates and times of any corrective actions you take on the property.
Okay, that's interesting. Why is the date so critical? Why isn't just saying, oh yeah, I fixed that broken step last fall enough?
Because that specific date counters something lawyers call constructive knowledge. It's this idea that if a hazard is there long enough and you haven't fixed it, the law can kind of assume you should have known about it, that you were negligent.
Ah,
But if you could pull out a note dated saying, check the trail last Tuesday, fix the railing Friday, boom, you've shown you were proactive, you were responsible. It just demolishes that claim of ongoing negligence, completely tilts the scales in your favor.
wow, okay. That's powerful. So besides fixing things, what else needs to go in this documentation pile?
Document conversations.
Yeah.
Seriously. Jot down notes from pre-visit chats with guests. Did you talk about known hazards? Did you explain the property lines? Write it down.
Okay.
And that brings us to the sometimes awkward part, the liability waiver.
Yeah, the waiver. It can feel a bit confrontational, maybe, especially with friends or family. Like you're saying, I don't trust you.
It can feel that way, I get it. But try framing it differently. It's not about mistrust. It's about shared understanding. It shows you've done your homework, assessed the risks.
Right.
And by signing, they're acknowledging that, yes, there are inherent risks when you're out in nature or on undeveloped land. Honestly, guests who genuinely appreciate the opportunity, they're usually happy to sign. It just kind of resets the dynamic in a good way.
Okay, that makes sense. Frame it as mutual understanding.
Yep.
So documentation is step 1. Now, step 2 is still paper, but it's visual. Create a map of the property.
Yes, the custom map. This isn't just nice to have. It's tangible proof you communicated risks proactively.
Is this hard to do? Do you need a surveyor?
Not at all. That's the great news.
Yeah.
There are free tools anyone can use. Google Earth is one.
Yeah.
Apps like HuntStand often have property lines already marked.
Oh, nice.
And if you want really detailed stuff, almost every county has a geographical information system, a GIS site online. Free public access. So really, no excuses not to make one.
Okay, easy to make, but what absolutely has to be on this map when you hand it over?
It needs to be pretty comprehensive. Obviously, mark the boundaries clearly, show any off-limits areas. You can point out the good spots too, like where to hunt or fish, sure. But most importantly, you must visually flag every known hazard you documented. Remember those corrective action notes, put those hazards on the map, and, crucially, include contact and emergency information right there on it.
So handing over that complete map really signals, hey, I care about your safety.
Exactly. It encourages guests to be responsible too, and it's more proof of your due diligence if anything ever goes wrong.
All right, so that covers the paper trail. We've got the dated notes, the waiver perhaps, and this detailed map. Now, let's get our boots dirty, metaphorically speaking. We need to move from the desk to the land itself.
Right. Which brings us to our next big theme, physical inspection and hazard mitigation. Step 3 is physically inspect your property.
You actually have to walk it.
You absolutely have to. The source material is really clear. There's absolutely no substitute for getting out there and looking around with purpose. You can write notes all day, but if you haven't seen the damage from the latest storm or, the new sinkhole that opened up,
You're flying blind.
you are.
Yeah.
And so many potential injuries or damages can be prevented just by giving people a heads up about dangers before they encounter them.
And the source acknowledges, realistically, that if you've got a big farm or a huge tract of land, this might take multiple trips, maybe even bring someone with you.
Yeah, definitely. Another set of eyes helps. One quick walk might not catch everything, especially on larger properties.
Okay, let's give folks a practical checklist then. What are the common high-risk hazards you really need to be looking for on vacant or rural land? Things that must go on that map.
This list is vital because these things pop up often and cause trouble. So look for dead trees, especially those big hanging branches they call widowmakers.
Right.
Old buildings, barns, sheds that look dilapidated, could be structurally unsound, steep drop-offs, cliffs, obviously. Any large unexpected holes in the ground. And this is a big one. Abandoned wells or cisterns.
Super dangerous.
Extremely. Also, check for old tree stands left by previous owners or hunters. They degrade over time. Barbed wire fences, especially if they're hidden in brush.
Okay.
Ponds, lakes, streams, any water body. Old mines or caves, if that's relevant to your area. And even things like power lines or cell towers can sometimes pose risks.
Now, are we just noting these down, or does the advice go further, like physically marking them too? If I find an old tree stand, is writing it on the map enough, or should I, put flagging tape on it?
That's a great question. The smart play is often to do both. Definitely note it on the map, but for serious dangers like an abandoned well, you should absolutely fence it off securely.
Right.
For things like old tree stands or maybe a patch of hidden barbed wire, using highly visible flagging tape is a really good idea. Mark the location clearly. Same goes for maybe unexpected drop-offs.
So map it and mark it physically when possible.
Yeah, the more steps you take to make the danger obvious, both on paper and on the ground, the harder it is for someone to claim negligence later. It just strengthens your position.
Okay, so the inspection's done, the map's updated, hazards are noted, maybe even flagged. But all this prep work is kind of useless if the guests don't actually take it in, right? How do we make sure the information transfers effectively?
Exactly. And that leads us perfectly into our next section, communication and setting boundaries. Step 4 is non-negotiable. Meet guests and review the map together.
Face to face.
Face to face. The source says this has to be a mandatory rule before anyone sets foot on your property unsupervised.
Okay, so what's the agenda for that meeting? They have the map, presumably. What needs that extra face-to-face emphasis?
You need to physically point things out on the map, show them the off-limits areas, explain any special rules about access times, like maybe not before sunrise. If there are multiple ways onto the property, show them exactly where they should enter and park.
Makes.
And this is critical, especially for folks like hunters who might be out there in the dark. Point out the dangers that are hard to see. Spending 2 minutes in daylight showing them where that steep gully is can prevent a serious accident hours later when it's pitch black.
That's a really good point. And this meeting is also the ideal time to lay down the law, so to speak. Set the rules of engagement.
Perfect time. Setting clear expectations up front avoids so much potential miscommunication and conflict down the road.
So what specific things should landowners cover in these ground rules?
Hit the common problem areas. Be really specific about trash. Pack it in, pack it out. Where exactly is parking allowed? What are the rules about alcohol? Are ATVs okay or totally banned? What about noise levels, especially if neighbors are nearby? And clarify rules about camping or having fires.
Basically leave no room for, oh, I didn't know, or I thought it was okay.
Precisely. Clear rules manage that relationship responsibly.
Okay, moving on to step 5. This brings us back to boundaries. Post no trespassing signs. Seems obvious, but the source gets specific about where and even how high to hang them. Why the fuss? Isn't a sign just a sign?
You'd think so, but experienced landowners know better. What's the first thing a trespasser says when you catch them?
Oh, I didn't know this was private property, or I didn't see any signs.
Exactly. Posting highly visible signs effectively removes that excuse. It makes the boundaries undeniable and reduces unauthorized entry just by being clear.
So what are the practical guidelines for posting them effectively for maximum visibility and, I guess, legal weight?
Well, first, check your local state laws, as they can vary. But generally, good practice suggests posting a sign roughly every 150 linear feet along your property lines.
Okay.
Also put them at every single point of entry gates, trailheads, roads, and maybe even every 75 feet or so along paths or roads that cross your land. Consistency is key.
Now, here's the part I found interesting, kind of counterintuitive. The advice to hang signs high up, like as high as you can reach, or in places that are tricky to get to. Why bother with that extra effort?
Yeah, it sounds odd, but there's a very practical, almost psychological reason based on legal principles, really about intent. The source kind of implies trespassers are lazy by nature.
Okay.
Think about it. If a sign is easy to reach and tear down, a trespasser can rip it off and then claim, "See, no sign." Their claim of ignorance or lack of intent is easier to make. But if your sign is way up high, screwed firmly into a tree in a thorny patch.
They're less likely to bother removing it. And if they do go to that effort, it shows clear intent to trespass.
And exactly. It makes it much harder for them to argue they lacked criminal intent.
Yeah.
You're not just marking your property, you're making it harder for someone to remove the evidence that they knew they were trespassing. It strengthens your case later if you involve law enforcement or pursue legal action.
That is actually really clever. Okay, fascinating stuff. So we're nearing the end of the steps. Our final theme is active ownership and final reward. Step 6 is be an active landowner. The source defines this in two main ways, right?
That's right. The first way is about relationship building. Keep in touch with your guests, whoever they are, hunters, bird watchers, hikers. Build some rapport.
Why is that important beyond just being friendly?
Well, first, it generally leads to a more satisfying ownership experience for everyone. But practically, it keeps you informed. Your guests can be your eyes and ears on the property. They might tell you about storm damage you haven't seen yet, or maybe signs of new trespassers.
Ah, okay, good point. And the second part of being active
Is property monitoring, and this applies even if you don't have guests using the land.
right, even if it's just a small vacant lot you own.
Exactly. You still need to pop over occasionally, check for new debris, especially after storms. Remember those widowmaker branches we talked about? Storms are notorious for creating new hazards like that overnight.
So it's about safety, even if no one's formally invited.
Yes, and it's also about discouraging unwanted activity. Squatters, trespassers, illegal dumping.
How does just visiting discourage squatters? Seems passive.
It's about visibility. When potential trespassers or someone thinking about setting up camp sees you actively checking your land, sees your vehicle parked there regularly, they're much less likely to target your property.
Ah, it signals this place is watched.
Precisely. Active, visible ownership is probably the best defense against those long-term, expensive headaches like adverse possession claims or established squatter situations.
Makes total sense. Okay, we've covered documentation, mapping, inspection, communication, posting signs, active monitoring. That brings us to the final step, step 7.
The best step.
Yeah.
Step 7 is enjoy.
Huh. After all that work.
Exactly. Look, you worked hard to get that land. It's likely a dream realized. By following these steps systematically, you've done the due diligence. You've taken reasonable precautions to protect yourself, your family, your asset.
You've mitigated the risk.
You've mitigated the risk. Now you can actually relax and take pride in it, knowing you've done things the right way.
So, wrapping this all up, what's the big picture here? We started talking about the anxiety of liability. Where have we landed?
I think we've shown how to transform that general worry into something manageable, into a structured, achievable safety plan. It's built on those key pillars: solid, dated documentation, thorough physical inspection and mitigation, and really clear mandatory communication with anyone using the land.
A practical toolkit, really.
It is, and following these steps genuinely helps make land ownership feel more worry-free. It protects your family, lets you enjoy your property without constantly looking over your shoulder for legal trouble.
And if folks want to learn even more about the nitty-gritty of landowner liability laws in their specific area.
Yeah, for deeper dives into state statutes and more specialized info, resources like the American Hunting Lease Association are a great place to look. They often have detailed information available.
Okay, great. So, before we sign off, here's something to chew on, a final thought for you listening. We've established that creating a detailed map and listing out all the potential hazards is a clear legal defense strategy. We know that works. But think about this. How does the simple act of sitting down with your guests face to face and reviewing those specific hazards and boundaries together, How does that change the relationship itself? Does it shift it from just being about potential risk to being about maybe shared responsibility for safety?
That's a really interesting point. That conversation itself builds something.
Yeah. Something to mull over next time you welcome someone onto your property. Think about how that conversation frames the whole interaction.